What's up, Kings of War fans? Utterly Spineless here, and I finally got round to doing my Basilea army review. Now, if those of you who've been watching my channel, my battle reports, you know that I've been playing pretty much exclusively Basilea for the last couple of months, so now I've got a bit of experience playing them under my belt and loads of different lists. I finally thought I'd get around to doing the review and giving you my 2 cents on how I play them and how I think they should be played. They're a nice army to play, lots of choices, lots of different options, quite an expansive list to choose from, and it's also one of the armies that Mantic does actually provide a lot of support for. It's one that they kind of spearheaded the whole Kings of War thing with, so you know, lots of models, and you can support Mantic with purchasing Basilea. You don't have to source them from outside companies. And, you know, Mantic obviously make very cheap models. Their sculpts aren't the best, if I'm honest, but they are significantly cheaper than most other companies, so that's definitely a bonus. So let's just jump straight in then, and Basilea, force alignment good, which means you can ally them with good or neutral armies, and the army special rule is Blessed be the Pious, or Iron Resolve. Really nice army special rule actually for the Basilea, and definitely gives them a very unique feel. Especially effective against shooting armies that are constantly chipping away at you, meaning you're constantly regenerating those runes throughout the game, and when you combine Iron Resolve with heal, which you can get from certain unit choices in this, it becomes actually very effective. So you can negate a lot of damage, mainly through shooting. It's more effective in shooting. But yeah, it's really nice and quite frustrating to play against, I can tell you that. So let's just dive straight in with the infantry choices first then, and you've got quite a few choices for Basilea. Let's kick off with the men-at-arms. Now, these units are both essentially exactly the same, one's with swords and one's with shields, except obviously, sorry, with spears. The ones with spears obviously have phalanx, and they do get the extra attacks as well. So you really got to ask yourself, do you want to be paying the points for phalanx? Are you going to be coming up against Thunderous Charge? Now, I used to run a horde of the men-at-arms with swords, but then I found out I wasn't quite getting the amount of damage from them, so it is cheap. 190 points for a horde of those guys is very cheap for a horde. That's a lot of nerve, and don't forget, you've got the Iron Resolve with that as well. So it's defense 4, it's a high nerve, and that can be a nice little bunker for your opponent to have to chew through at only 190 points. That's pretty effective. But more recently, I've started just upgrading them to the spears, because of the new changes. Thunderous Charge is a little bit more prevalent because it's not been nerfed as much, and then those 5 extra attacks, they do make a big difference as well. So I normally now run a horde of the spears and give them Brew of Strength as well, and try and get a Bane chant behind them, because then you've got a pretty good anchor unit there with the high nerve and the phalanx, which means they negate all Thunderous, and also they're kicking out Thunderous too. So I really like that. Now I've started running that. Chaff-wise, though, you're probably going to want to go for the men-at-arms with the swords and field those in troops. 80 points for that unit. Defense 4, again, the Iron Resolve, 10, 12. That's decent chaff, that really is. I don't run either of these in regiments. I've never done that. I'm not saying there's no room for it, but, you know, actually, 115 points for a regiment of the guys with swords. 1460 nerve, that ain't half bad. That's cheap for that. So there's definitely room to run those in regiments as well. On to Penitent mobs then, and now, if you check out these guys, ooh, here's my infantry choice with Crushing 1 and Headstrong. Wow, that's really cool, and look how cheap they are. But look at the kicker, melee up 5. So yeah, that's the trouble with them. They're hitting on 5s, so you know, if you hinder the hitting on 6s, you're just not going to get damage out of these guys. Trust me, I've tried. I fielded them in horde before, and this just didn't work. So the way I play these guys now, if I do field them, I field them in troops, and I just use them as chaff. They're 70 points instead of 80 points against the men-at-arms, so they're just that 10 points cheaper. And they got the lower defense, and they got the lower nerve. So yes, they're more likely to break. Yes, they're more likely to get routed. But you know, chaff is just disposable. So that's how I feel them. And you know, sometimes you can get a cheeky little flank charge off with them, or you know, things like that. But you just don't expect any damage out of these guys. I suppose if you wanted to, you could maybe play a horde of these guys and give them Brew of Sharpness. That's an idea. I've never done that before, but it is an idea. They're 165 points, which is literally dirt cheap. I think that's their only saving grace, is just the fact that they're dirt cheap. So yeah, maybe a horde of these guys at 1921, and you're getting that Iron Resolve, and you maybe get some healing on them. Could be a potential thorn in your opponent's side. So you know, there's definitely room to do that. But I mainly field these guys as chaff and put them down in troops. Onto Paladin Footguard then, and this is actually a unit choice that I really like and field very often. If you just look at the stats, they don't really, scream anything great, but here's what you're looking at. They don't have any crushing or anything like that, so ignore their offensive capabilities, but their defensive capabilities are very good, I think. So, a regiment, you're paying 150 points, and that gets you a nerve of 15, 17, and defense 5, with headstrong and iron resolve. That is a lot of wounds, that's a lot of wounds for your opponent to chew through. With that iron resolve and the headstrong, which means if they're wavering on a 3-up, they're still passing that. It's just a really good anchor unit for your opponent to have to deal with, and you're only paying 150 points for it. That's cheap for 15, 17 defense 5. That's very cheap. So that's what I do. I field at least one of these. I usually field 2. So I'm fielding my horde of men-at-arms with spears then, for example, and then just having 2 units flanking them. 2 regiments of paladins flanking them, and I find that to actually be quite effective. They're a huge damage soak. Offensively wise though, okay, they've only got 12 attacks hitting on 3s, but that's 8 hits, and if you can get a Bane chant on them, they can kick off not huge amounts of damage, let's be honest, but they can do something. And hitting on 3s is nice as well, because it means if they are hindered, they're still only hitting on 4s. So I really like those units, and that's how I feel them anyway. In the troops as well, though, they also make quite good chaff. So you get that defense 5 still, 11, 13 on the nerve, which is high, and that defense 5, which means, if your opponent's shooting lightning bolts at him, he's still wounding on 4s. That's pretty tough. And again, there's nothing worse than chaff being wavered, and these guys have headstrong. So if they're wavering in front of your stuff on a 3-up, you can shrug it off. That's actually quite good, because there is literally nothing worse than Kings of War than your chaff being wavered and your big killer units sitting behind them. That can be extremely frustrating. So that's one thing you don't have to deal with if you field your Paladin infantry. So good choices there. And then if you want the extra crushing strength, you can get it as well for free. You do drop your defense to 4, so obviously you're kind of losing your defensive capabilities on them. But I really like these selections, and I usually field like 2 regiments of these. I think they're great. On to Sisterhood Infantry then, and unfortunately I don't have any models for these, so I very rarely field them because then I have to proxy. But these are really nice unit choices actually for the Basilea. These would be like your Berserker style infantry, I suppose you could call them, because they have that crushing one. And these guys actually have Vicious as well, which is really nice. So they're very similar to your Penitents, except they're hitting on 4s instead of 5s. So they've just got a lot more damage output. They're soft as hell, they have defense 3. But, a horde of these guys is nothing to be sniffed at, especially if you want to go and give them something like Brew of Strength, and then you're crushing 2 with Vicious. That's some serious damage that these guys can kick out. That low defense is definitely a weakness, though. They're going to get shot at, definitely. If your opponent sniffs that you've got a horde that's defense 3 there, they're going to be shooting everything at them. So you probably want to put some heal next to them. You definitely want to put some inspiring next to them, that's for sure. But a really nice unit, though. I'm not sure about troops of these, because you're paying 90 points instead of, let's compare that to your Penance, you're paying 70. So do you want to pay that extra 20 points for chaff that's going to die fairly quickly? You're probably not going to see your points back there. Regiments are good though, and a horde is really nice. Yeah, like I said, these are really nice choices, and if you want that crushing strength, and don't forget that Vicious, the more crushing strength you have, that Vicious then becomes more efficient in points. So yeah, if you want to feel those guys and give them Brew of Strength, or maybe even put a Bane chant behind them, they can kick out a ton of damage, way more than your opponent expects. Really nice choice for the Basilea, these guys. So last, but by no means least, we have Crossbowmen. These are the only range-capable unit in the entire army, aside from breath attacks from your Phoenixes and things of that nature. But if you want range damage, these are your only choice. They're pretty much just your stock Crossbowmen that you're going to find in other lists, such as Kingdoms of Men and stuff like that. I would say that if you're going to field these guys, it's either troops or hordes. Regiments are in a bit of no man's land, where you find yourself paying an extra 30 points for 2 extra shots over a troop. So I wouldn't field them in regiments. I'd probably field them in a troop or a horde. I don't field these kind of units mainly because of that reload. It can really hinder you anytime you got to move. You don't get to shoot. They can kick off a lot of damage though, but the way I play my Basilea, I don't think there's room for these kind of units the way I play, so I don't tend to field them. If you want to field, if you want range capable, there's other armies to play. Frankly, go play your goblins, go play Ratkin, that kind of thing. I don't think crossbowmen are well suited to this army, so I don't play them. That's just my thing. On to cavalry then, and let's start with Paladin Knights. These are your standard knights for Basilea. They come in troops, regiments, and they even come in hordes, which is awesome. Although, in all honesty, I've never actually had the balls to field a horde of cav. I don't know why I have the models. I just never done it. They're pretty good in regiments, these guys. They come with they're just your classic cavalry, but these guys come with headstrong and iron resolve, so they're a little bit tougher than normal cav. I think obviously the tough thing with cavalry is that if you fluff your initial attacks, you lose that thunderous, and then they can become a little bit useless. So that's always the problem you're going to have with cav. But these guys are 210, pretty standard. Your items you're going to want on these is going to potion the caterpillar, obviously to stop you getting hindered. Maybe something like extra speed, maybe brew of haste, something like that. Maybe brew of strength if you want them to hit really hard. But me, I don't know. Maybe it's just me. I really struggle to make use of units like this. I feel one regiment of cavalry usually, and then when I feel two, I find that one is okay and the other is almost useless. I don't know what. Maybe it's just my playstyle. I really struggle to get effective use out of units like this, because I find if you lose their thunderous, they're literally totally rubbish. So it is always awkward to use these. I do like them in troops as well, though. A nerve of 12-14 with that headstrong iron resolve is pretty good on a troop of these, and they can just whip around the board, grabbing objectives, stuff like that. So I quite like them in troops as well. And speaking of items to give them, you could give them elite. That does make them hit a little harder on the initial charge. And a really good formation actually is the Holy Lancers formation for Basilea. So you have to take 2 regiments of Paladin Knights, and then you take the Neas? I'm going to say Neas? I'm not sure on that guy's name. But basically it gives 2 of your regiments of knights elite, which is really cool. And also obviously frees up your elite item as well. Blessing of the gods, because you haven't taken it, so you got elite on 2 of your regiments then, and that can mean the initial charge of your cavalry hits that little bit harder. Hopefully that makes your cavalry a little bit more effective. So that's actually quite a good formation. I have played it before. But yeah, so that's Paladin Knights. So another choice for cavalry is your Sisterhood Panther Lancers. Now these are your fast cav. They are speed 10 nimble, which is literally awesome. If you've watched any of my battle reports, you know how much I love nimble, especially on speed 10. These are great units, both in troops and in regiments, and they were a firm favourite of mine when Helm of the Ram was around, because giving these guys Thunderous 2 was awesome. But unfortunately that item is gone now, and they're just a little bit less effective. So weaknesses for these guys is the fact that they're defense 3. They're super squishy. It's frustrating actually, because they're 9 identical to Goblin Fleabag Riders, which I also play. And Goblin Fleabag Riders is defense 4, and these guys are defense 3. Oh, it's just a little bit annoying, and they're 175 points. They do come with Vicious though, which is nice. But what you got to watch out for is when you get hindered with these guys and you lose your Thunderous, they can become totally ineffective, because you've got 16 attacks hitting on 4s. If you're hindered, you're hitting on 5s, and you've lost your Thunderous, they are nigh on useless if you're hindered. So you've got to make some choices. Do you want to give your potion of the caterpillar to your Sisterhood, or do you want to give it to your Paladin Knights? I'd probably argue you'd rather go on your Paladin Knights, and therefore you've got to be careful with your Sisterhood Panther Lancers, and that's why I only ever field 1 of these. If you start fielding 2 units of these or 3 units of these, that some of them are going to be hindered, and then you're rendered a little bit ineffective. So that is my gripe with these guys, the fact that they've got the 16 attacks hitting on 4s. It's a little unfortunate. I wish these guys were just a little bit more punchy, and that's why I'm frustrated that they took out Helm of the Ram out of the game in the new Clash of Kings 2018, because it was great at just buffing units like this, which are not quite as effective as you want them to be, and then you give them that item and all of a sudden they're right where you want them. So that's kind of like where I feel Sisterhood Panther Lancers lie at the moment. They're still in my list usually, because at 175 points, speed 10 nimble is just... It's just really good. Put them on the flanks, get around your opponent's side, make them have to move around and give them questions to answer. but I just wish they punched a little bit harder, that's all. So on to large cavalry then, and there's only one choice in Basilea, and that is the Sisterhood Panther chariots. I'm not a fan of these models, not even in the slightest, and I have never ever fielded them. A couple of reasons why is one, Mantic don't even make models for them, so it's quite difficult to. I suppose you could buy the elf ones and then convert them over, but that's a lot of time and energy, and even the elf ones from Mantic are just horrible, horrible sculpts. So no, would not buy those. And secondly, even if you wanted to proxy something in, I just think these units they're not great. I'm not a fan of chariots in general. All chariots have been buffed in Clash of Kings 2018, and I assume that's because Mantic realised that no one was actually playing chariots. And the main reason for me is just the base size. The base size is insane. It's 200 millimeters deep. I mean, you're leaving yourself so exposed to flank charges there that like your unit's just going to crumble. So why would you field a horde of chariots that's, especially these ones, are 280 points for a defense 4 unit that even with a nerve buff is only 17-19. That's too squishy for a unit that costs that much. And then so you think to yourself, okay, well, it's glass cannon, what's its damage capabilities? And it's only Thunderous 2. It's not great. It's too much of a point sink. So why would you pay 280 points for a horde of those chariots when you could pay 300 points and get a horde of Elohi? You just wouldn't, would you, points wise? No, don't like these units, don't like them in regiments, don't like them in hordes, never field them. That's just me anyway, leave them out. So that brings us on to war engines then, and as I mentioned earlier, Basilea is an army that's renowned for its range capabilities, and that's definitely reflected in its war engines as well, because you only have the one choice. Having said that though, it isn't a totally bad choice. A heavy Arbalest, I think it's called, is only 65 points, which is pretty cheap actually, and for that you're getting just one shot, but it is Blast D3 plus 2, which isn't terrible, and it's piercing 3 as well. I've never actually fielded one of these because I'm not a huge fan of war engines. It hits on a 5, and that's if your opponent isn't in cover and if you do have line of sight. So realistically, if you field one of these, you can expect to get 1 hit a game. If you can get 2 or 3 and get lucky, then fine. But, you know, that's why people who field war engines tend to field them in 2s or even 3s, and that's just not a play style that I really like. I don't like playing with that, and I don't like playing against that, and for that reason, I'm not a fan of war engines. But having said that, if you build a list and you've got like 65 points left over, or maybe like 130 points, and you want to chuck in 2 of these, then yeah, fine, they're not a total waste of time. But, you know, I don't think that's playing to the strengths of Basilea. I think there's better options here, and that's why I don't field the war engine. So up next then, and large infantry, and there's only one choice again here, but it is the best choice in the army by far, Elohi. Ask anyone who plays Basilea and they will tell you that these are just absolutely insanely good units. They are really the absolute stars of the show. So let's look at hordes first. What does 300 points get you? So a flying unit with 18 attacks in on 3s, crushing 1, thunderous 1, and inspiring, which is a definite bonus, and defense 5, fearless 17. So that defense 5, fearless 17 with Iron Resolve makes them super tough. It really does. The fact that they're fearless means that you always get your Iron Resolve because they're never wavered. So unless they're routed, which is difficult to do because they inspire themselves, so unless they're routed, you're always getting that Iron Resolve. And the fact that you've got a flying horde, which is inspiring itself, is a hell of a bonus because it means they can fly off on their own without having to worry about keeping them in that inspiring bubble. 18 attacks hitting on 3s, crushing 1, thunderous 1. So they're not super killy, right? They're not super killy, but they are really good. If you want to give them items to make them hit a little bit harder, something like Elite is good, or maybe Brew of Strength for extra crushing, or maybe something like Brutal. You know, these good items on these, they really do need an item just to make them hit that little bit harder. But they're really good units, and the fact that they're hordes as well. I always field mine in hordes, but you know, not many people know this actually, but hordes have been buffed again in Clash of Kings 2018 because when it comes to controlling objective markers, unit strength actually counts now. So, for example, if you had a horde within 3 inches of an objective, but your opponent had a regiment, he wouldn't cancel you out, which is what happened before. But before you only needed to contest an objective, now unit strength matters, so a horde would score it over a regiment or a troop, for example. So in scenarios like invade, they count for 3 points, dominate, they count for 3 points, they count for 3 points holding objective markers. They literally do win games, Elohi do. You look at them on paper and you think, oh, 300 points is a lot. I'm not getting a super killer unit for that, but trust me, they win games. They are that good. I normally field minimum one, at least one, Horde of Elohi, sometimes two. A lot of the time I field two. Now, notice I'm only talking about hordes here, and that's because I don't field them in regiments. And I will come on to that a little bit later because... Actually, no, let's talk about it now. The main reason I don't field Elohi in regiments is because there's a better choice. Instead of fielding a regiment of Elohi, you could field an Elohi as a hero choice. Now, he is a 180 point hero choice. He's just basically an Elohi hero. So he has 6 attacks hitting on 3s, but he's crushing 2, thunderous 1. And then obviously you get the flying, inspiring. And basically, he is 15 points cheaper than fielding a regiment of Elohi. He has the same amount of damage output because he's got 6 attacks instead of 9, so slightly less damage, but he's got crushing 2, thunderous 1 instead of just crushing. He's got that heal, which you're never going to use, but, you know, it's there if you need it. And this guy is just, he's got that tiny base size. He's really good for whipping around the board and, like, getting some flank charges off and getting rear charges off. And he's Fearless 15 instead of Fearless 14. And he's 15 points cheaper. So... for me, that's just a much better choice, and that's why I don't field my Elohi in regiments. You can see I've multi-based my Elohi in hordes because I wouldn't field them in regiments because your Elohi is just a much better choice in that slot, I reckon. So that's my thoughts on that unit as well. And Elohi, again, just an amazing pick in Basilea army. I think most armies would literally give their right arm to be able to field units this good. He's on a 40 mil base. He's inspiring, he's got fly, he can just whip around the board. He is an absolute thorn in your opponent's side. I always field an Elohi, sometimes I field 2. Sorry, an Elohi, sometimes I field 2. So really, when you're making your list, you've got a choice. Do you want to field 1 Elohi horde or 2? And then maybe if you only field 1, do you want to field 2 Elohis as well? Again, the fact that these guys are inspiring means that you don't have to like worry about hero choices. These are just super good picks. Both the Horde of Elohi and the Elohi. Pick them, put them in your list. They are that good. Okay, moving on. So now we're on to monsters, and yet again there's only one choice, but it's a really good one. Phoenixes, 165 points, and what do you get for that? Well, you get a flying monster that's defense 3, so a little bit weak, but it's got regen on a 4-up and a 14-16 nerve with inspiring. It has heal 6 and breath attack 10, so a really versatile monster this. You can just sit behind your troops, inspiring them and healing them, or it can, you know, fly up to go cap an objective or put a breath attack 10 on something. And as if that wasn't good enough, it also, for some reason, has 3 attacks hitting on 3s with crushing 1, which is really just the icing on the cake, because you can just, if you see a flank exposed or even a rear, you can charge this thing in there. Or flying, obviously, you can go over things with a 20-inch range and really catch your opponent napping when he just didn't expect it. You know, if you get a rear charge with this, he's got 9 attacks hitting on 3s, crushing 1. That's nothing to be sniffed at. I don't know why it has combat stats. It simply doesn't need them. And you're getting all this for 165 points. Really versatile. It can cap objectives. It can be your bit of shooting if you don't have it with the breath attack 10. It's inspiring itself with a relatively high nerve, and not only that, but it's regenerating on a 4-up, so people don't even like to shoot at it because obviously it's regenerating half the wounds you put on it. Just fantastic monsters, extremely versatile, very useful, and yeah, play 1 in your lists. I played 2 more recently just because they are that good, so huge fan of Phoenixes. Yeah, put them in your list, they're great. Okay, so that's the bulk of the army done, and now we are on to hero choices. And you really are spoilt for choice here because there are 13 hero choices for Basilea, including 3 living legends. So tons and tons of choice in terms of heroes. So let's kick off with the Dictator, I suppose. Now this is just your Billy basic guy. He's as cheap as it gets. He's 90 points. He's a source of inspiring, but he's got 3 attacks and crushing 1. So you got the choice to mount him on a warhorse as well, and that gives him Thunderous, but you're paying 30 points to do that. I've never actually fielded this because I just don't think he really fills... I don't really think he has a role to play. You've got tons of inspiring as Basilea anyway, because your Elohi is inspiring, your Elohi is inspiring, so say for example you play 2 hordes of Elohi, you've already got 2, you only really need an extra 1, so you don't need this individual that you maybe would take in other armies just as an extra inspiring, because Basilea are just, you don't need it. So if I was going to take him, I'd almost definitely want to put him on a warhorse, just because he'd have that like extra range. So he's coming in at 120 points, and he's not doing an awful lot for 120 points, unfortunately, because he's only got those 3 attacks at crushing 1. So no, for me, I don't feel the dictator. I just think for 120 points, you can get better stuff, and you know, it depends on your local meta. I know a lot of metas have cheap individuals like this, and they use them as chaff and just like, you know, march block units and stuff like that. But for me, I don't have that playstyle, so I've never actually fielded a dictator. So no, unfortunately. So what's next then? Bearer of the Holy Icon. So this is your cheap source of inspiring. That's pretty much in most armies. It's 55 points, and for that you literally just get a guy who's totally rubbish, but he is inspiring. You've got the choice whether you want to mount him on a horse. I usually take a Bearer of the Holy Icon, and my personal preference with this guy is either Loot of Insatiable Darkness for Bane Chant, which is awesome, and then park it behind your horde for extra crushing, or maybe behind your paladins for extra crushing. Or if you really want to go like a very defensive army, you could give him Banner of the Griffin to give things rallying, stuff like that. A lot of other armies put things like you know, breath attacks on their BSBs, but I don't do that. Not for Basilea. I do it for my goblins, but not for Basilea, because that's not really the kind of like their playstyle. So with this guy, my preference is either Bane Chant or rallying. A choice between those two. I would usually prefer Bane Chant. And I never take them on a horse either, because it's kind of pointless. So you usually field characters like this on horses if you need line of sight to make them height 2, if you're going to give them like a you know, a spell to cast. But for Bane Chant you don't need that, so you want to keep his cost down to a minimum. So on to the priest next, and again this is your like a cheap hero, 75 points. And he has heal 3, and this is the guy that you can give Bane Chant to. So he's the only hero in all of Basilea that you can have Bane Chanted, because obviously when this was written, Loot of Insatiable Darkness didn't exist. But here's the kicker: because of Loot, I don't think this guy has a role in the army. You can pay 15 points to give him Bane Chant, right? And he comes with heal 3. So what I have done in the past is given him Shroud of the Saint to give him heal 6, I think that then makes him, and then upgraded him with a Bane Chant, so you've got a character at the back which can either heal or Bane Chant, and it is nice to have that utility at the back. But unfortunately he's not inspiring, because he only inspires Penitents, and if you don't play Penitents, then you've got a character that's not inspiring your troops, so kind of inefficient in terms of points there. So yeah, an awkward one. If you're running Penitents, then brilliant, put him in, because you can Bane Chant your Penitents, which are crushing 1. But again, those Penitents are hitting on 5, so don't expect any damage out of them. So yeah, so an awkward one, the priest. But because of Loot of Insatiable Darkness that can now be given to your BSB, I don't think the priest has a role in Basilea anymore. Having said that, though, you can build your entire army around a priest, thanks to the new formation in Clash of Kings 2018. So the formation is called Shield of the Golden Horn, and basically you get 2 regiments of men-at-arms with swords and a horde of them with spears, and then your priest does inspire your men-at-arms. Not only that, he's very inspiring to your men-at-arms. And then also gives them +2 rallying, which is literally awesome, actually. So I've never actually played this formation, but it's really good. It's kind of very similar to what I play, but I substitute the men-at-arms for paladins because they're defense 5. But play this formation and imagine then your priest is very inspiring. And not only that, but you can give him the Bane Chant, and you can give him the what's it called, Shroud of the Saint as well. So now you've got a sizable chunk of your army, which is all rallying to with heal and Bane Chant behind him. That's a really nice formation. I like that. I've never played it, but it's really good. I think the reason Mantic did this is because they saw kind of what had happened with the Basilea, that no one was playing Penitent, so the priest was kind of like null and void. So they thought they chucked this in. It's good. I like it. So on to high paladins then, and this guy, you've got 4 different choices how you want to field this guy. He can come on foot, he can come on a horse, he can come on a griffin, or he can come on a dragon. So let's just cover him on foot really. What do you get? 130 points, and you're getting 5 attacks for that, hitting on 3s with crushing 1. That ain't half bad, 5 attacks for 130 points. I probably wouldn't field him on foot, to be honest, just because if you're going to field individuals like this, generally speaking, it's just better to put them on a horse or some kind of mount, because you know you've got that much bigger threat range, because individuals, their maneuverability is really what's so great about them. So I would almost always put them on a horse if I was going to field him. So you're more than likely looking at 160 points instead of 130. And then he does kind of get pretty expensive, actually, so you're getting 5 attacks for that. The trouble with the High Paladin on the horse and the High Paladin on the Griffin is that you've got to compare it to the Elohi, and then the Elohi is just a much better pick, isn't he? Because he's coming in at 180 points, and he's got Flying, and he's got Crushing 2, Thunderous 1, and he's Fearless 15. So he's okay. Yes, the Paladin's got Headstrong, but the Elohi's Fearless. Yeah, he's just, I think, and he's flying as well. He's just a better pick. The same with the High Paladin on the Griffin. He's Crushing 2, so the Elohi is Thunderous 1 instead of Crushing 2. I mean, stat-wise, the Elohi is 30 points cheaper than the High Paladin on the Griffin, that's a lot of points, and you're getting a model that's just as good. Just as good for 30 points less. So that's why I don't feel the High Paladin on the Griffin. The Elohi is a better choice. I'm not saying you shouldn't feel the High Paladin on the horse, though. That's not a bad shout. I've never actually fielded that, but there's a lot of room for the individuals that can just whip around, causing carnage for your opponent. And this guy, yeah, with the Headstrong and 5 attacks hitting on 3s, the Crushing 1, Thunderous 1, that's not bad at all. Yeah, I would play that. One thing that is frustrating about these Paladins is they all come with heal 2. Ugh, what a pain in the ass. You're paying points for that, don't forget, and you're never going to use it. Why would you? If you play a High Paladin and a Griffin, are you going to, just move up behind you guys and go, ooh, let's get my 1 wound back on that you? No, you're not going to, are you? That would be dumb. You're going to put him into combat, definitely. So you're paying points for something that's totally useless there, unfortunately. How about the guy on the dragon, though? Yeah, this is a nice unit on the dragon. Not only that, Mantic have a new model, which was just released about a month ago. I don't know why it took them 3 years to just give you the elf dragon with a paladin on top. it's literally the same model, and it took them 3 years to do. But anyway, and it's not particularly pretty dragon either. It is only 30 quid, though. Yeah, so this ignore the base size as well, because that's actually on a 50 by 50 mil base. Mantic and monster base size is just it's a topic for another video. Let's put it that way. Monster bases are ridiculous. Anyway, yeah, this is a nice unit. 310 points gets you a pretty tough monster that can fly around, being a constant thorn in your opponent's side. He's pretty punchy as well. 9 attacks at crushing 3s, wounding most things on 2s, and obviously he's inspiring and he's got that breath attack. So yeah, this is a really nice model. Coming in at 310 points, you really got to compare him with the Horde of Elohi. What would you rather, another Horde of Elohi or this guy? It's tough. The Horde of Elohi definitely hits a lot harder because they got 18 attacks instead of 9. So yeah, I'd probably go with a Horde of Elohi over this guy, actually, unfortunately. My reason for not fielding this unit, though, is a mate of mine plays Varangur, right? And for Varangur, you have a unit choice called King on Chimera, and it's exactly the same points as 310. And for some reason, it's exactly the same as the High Paladin on Dragon, except you get an extra attack, you get higher nerve, and you get elite. So it's exactly the same points, and it's significantly better. So that's why I can't bring myself to field this model, because I know that if I'm playing my mate and I play this, we have exactly the same thing, and his is just better for the same points, and that's annoying. So hero choices for the Sisterhood then, and you get the Abbesses. Abbess? Yeah, I think it's Abbess. 2 nice hero choices here, actually. So first off, you got the Abbess mounted on foot, and then you can put that one on a Panther. Again, I almost definitely would mount her on a Panther. Nice hero, crushing 1, thunderous 1, 4 attacks. So a little bit better than the Dictator. And that vicious is good, because don't forget, obviously, if you're wounding on 2s, that vicious is just better than if you're wounding on 5. So the more crushing and thunderous you have, the more effective vicious is. And the fact that you are mounting this one on a panther to get speed 10 instead of a normal horse to get speed 8 means your threat range is just, significantly higher. So this is a really nice hero choice, actually. A little bit weaker, obviously, with that defense 4 and the lower nerve, but what you're losing in that, you're making up for in offensive capabilities, and only 110 points for that. That's actually a really nice choice, I gotta be honest. I've never fielded that, but I'm looking at it now thinking, yeah, that's actually quite good. You probably only want to play these heroes if you were playing the Sisterhood, though. If you were playing the Sisterhood Panther Lancers, or if you were playing the Infantry, because otherwise, you obviously you're getting the inspiring otherwise. So a little bit inefficient in points if you're going to field these without the Sisterhood Infantry. And again, on the chariot then, this has been buffed in Clash of Kings 2018, so this choice now has Nimble, which again is just really nice. Speed 9 Nimble hero, a crushing 1, thunderous 1, and again that vicious, 8 attacks in all 3s. This is a really nice unit choice, and only 170 points. I think most chariot heroes in the game are around about 185. I know the orc one is. So yeah, a little bit cheaper. This is a really nice choice, and you're getting that defense 5 here. I like both of these, actually. So if you're going to play the Sisterhood Infantry in regiments or hordes or even troops, and you're going to field the Panther Lancers, these are 2 really nice hero choices to go along with it. Yeah. Right, on to Wizards then, and not a bad little choice this, actually. The good thing about it being that they are cheap, they're only 60 points, and for that, what are you getting? Well, not a lot, you're getting Firebolt 8, but that's about it. But you do have the options for Lightning Bolts and Wind Blast. I've never actually taken Wind Blast. It's just a bit it's a bit gimmicky, isn't it, really, Wind Blast, and there's not a lot of use for it. It's generally speaking, you'd run it in a range army to push people away from you, but that's not really what Basilea are doing. You want to be in the combat, so you don't. So for that reason, I've never taken Wind Blast. And it's a bit of a shame that you can't swap the Lightning Bolt for the Fireball. You have to pay 25 points for it. If you're going to go down the Lightning Bolt route, you've got to pay 25 points for that. I would definitely get the Amulet to get you more Lightning Bolts, and that makes them Lightning Bolt 5. Just a bit more of a threat. But what Wizards are really good for now is the new spell in Clash of Kings 2018 is Martyr's Prayer. So 60 points, and you pay 25 points for Martyr's Prayer, and you are getting heal 7 for 85 points. And because that's a spell and not an item, that frees you up to give him some items. Maybe you want to put Inspiring Talisman on him. That's not a bad shout. Nice little cheap heal bot behind your hordes that are just healing them and giving out Inspiring as well. Why not? So yeah, a lot of options with this guy between the Fireball and the Lightning Bolt, and then you can give him some healing as well. It's a nice little unit choice for the army. I like Wizards. On to Living Legends then, and first up we have Gnaeus Salustus. I really like this model, actually. I really like the sculpt. I think it's probably one of the better ones Mantic have done, and it looks really nice on the board. So let's have a look. 190 points. What does it get you? Well, it gets you a nice hero. Defense 5, 15, 17. Again, with that Iron Resolve, so he's pretty damn tough. And he is Crushing 2, Speed 9, Nimble with 7 attacks. Now, that Speed 9, Nimble is what makes this guy really good. I think if he didn't have that Nimble, he'd be okay, but that Nimble makes him really good. I actually really like this model because, don't forget, he is hero large cavalry, which means he's height 3 and he has Nimble. So this guy can charge into the front of cavalry and then corkscrew charge something behind them the following turn. Really, really dirty for doing that. It's fantastic. And he's got that tiny little base size, so corkscrew charges out really easy for this guy. Really catch your opponent unawares. Something to definitely watch out for. He's got that heal 3, which you're not going to use, obviously, because you want him in combat. But yeah, really nice one. I think you've probably got to compare him to the Elohi again. Very similar units. Oh, it's tough. The Elohi has flying, so if you want a bit more flying and that extra threat range, you'd probably play the Elohi instead, because he's like 10 points cheaper. And the big difference is now that Headstrong is on a 3-up, this guy is just a little bit better. Because if that Headstrong was on a 4-up, I'd probably say the Elohi is better, but now there's not much between them. And where this guy really comes into his own as well is if you play with cavalry, you can play the new formation, the Holy Lancers, which means you play this guy, 2 regiments of knights, and your knights have elite, which is good. That's a nice little formation. This is a nice character. And again, just a really nice sculpt. I'm a big fan of this guy. I should play him more, to be honest, but yeah, he's really good. Next we have Julius, Dragon of Heaven, and Samacris, Mother of Phoenixes. These two are kind of linked. They have a cool special rule going between them. So let's just look at Julius first. So this guy is 275 points, so he's very expensive, but for that you are getting a hero with 8 attacks, a Crushing Tooth, Thunderous 1, so he's got fairly killy. He's very inspiring, which is nice to have that 9-inch range, and he is Defense 6, Fearless 16. I'm a big fan of Defense 6 stuff. I just think a lot of it's like can come down to like points denial for your opponent. It's seriously tough to kill things that are Defense 6, especially because this guy, again, he has Iron Resolve. So he's Defense 6, Fearless 16 with Iron Resolve. That is tough for your opponent to deal with. He's probably not getting shot off the board anytime soon. He's going to have to take a charge from something pretty damn killy to get him off the board, let's be honest. So if you want to play that game, yeah, cool. He's 275 points is expensive though for only 8 attacks. So I tell you what I would like is if this guy was an individual, then that would make him awesome. The same thing Herja used to be for Varangur, that the fact that she could be literally anywhere because of that 360 line of sight. But yeah, this guy's definitely worth fielding, mainly because of that Defense 6. That really just puts him on another level, making him particularly hard to kill. So yeah, I actually have this model. I've got him painted up. I've never actually played him. I should try him out. On to Samacris then. And I'm not really a fan of this one, mainly because you're paying 230 points. And for that, you're getting a caster which has Fireball 10, Heal 7, and Lightning Bolt 5. So yes, lots of tricks up your sleeve, but don't forget, every time you're casting one of those spells, you're essentially paying points for 2 other spells that you're not casting. So it's really points inefficient to have a caster that has multiple spells. Regen 5 though on this one, so defense 5 with regen 5 is good. Again, both these 2 units are really tough to kill, so if you field them, your opponent is going to have to, think a lot about how he's going to get them off the board. I would probably go with Julius over Samacris though. If you feel the Samacris, say for example you stay behind your unit and you heal it for 7, well, you may as well have been a Phoenix that turn because you're just inspiring with heal 7, right? In which case you're just a Phoenix that's, what, 60 points more, is it? What a Phoenix is, 165? Do you see what I mean? You're not really going to cast the Fireball either because Lightning Bolt is better because of that piercing 1. So yeah, I think that Samacris is kind of like Jack of all trades, master of none. I'm not a big fan. Julius is definitely worth a shout though. In terms of that Twin Souls, now that's a little bit of a game changer because that that heal 7 with Elite, if you field both of them you get Elite. Now that is good, but you're looking at 505 points if you field both of these. That's a lot of points. I mean, if you're playing a 2,000 point game, that's a quarter of your army's points in just 2 characters. So you'd probably only do that if you were playing in like a 2,500 point, maybe a 3,000 point game. Otherwise, it's just, yeah, it's risky putting that much points in just 2 drops. That's what I think about that anyway. So lastly then, let's just look at the new units that Basilea got in Clash of Kings 2018. We've got Paladin Defenders and we've got Gur Panthers. Let's talk about the Paladin Defenders first. Now, this is exactly the same as a troop of Paladin Foot Guards. Stat-wise, they're absolutely identical. The only difference is these have heal 4. They do lose Headstrong, though. It's definitely worth noting. So you might think to yourself, oh, wow, that's cool. You can have a little troop of chaff that has heal 4 that can, heal up all your other units from chaff. That's amazing. But what you're forgetting is that the normal thing about casters is that they are individuals, so they can cast on anything all around them. And it's not an issue in terms of line of sight and facing and stuff like that. Not so with these. They are a troop, so it means if they want to heal your other guys, they have to be facing your other guys, in which case you can't use them as chaff because they can't be in front. So you think to yourself, okay, well, I'll put them behind. And then like, okay, well then, what are they doing then? In that case, you've got 105 points for a unit that's healing. That's not points inefficient. You can do that from a from a wizard with Martyr's Prayer, for example. So really tough. I fielded these units twice, and I just find that they're difficult to use because you want to be using that heal which you paid for, but at the same time you want to be using them as chaff. And don't forget what I said about the troops of Paladin Defenders. The best thing about them as chaff, they are expensive, but they have Headstrong, which means if they're wavering, which is a total nightmare, you can shake off a waver. Now these guys can't do that, so yeah, they're actually quite tough to use, and I'm not a huge fan of them, to be honest. So I feel I played them twice, but then nah, never since, and I found that heal just wasn't worth it. How about the Panthers though? This is actually quite a nice little unit. It's a troop of the Panthers from the Panther Lancers, but obviously without riders. Now they are 120 points, and for that you get a little troop of height 1. They're cavalry, but they're height 1. And you get 10 attacks, hitting on 4s, speed 10 nimble, thunderous charge, and vicious. But more importantly, you get Pathfinder. So quite a nice little unit this, actually. That speed 10 nimble is obviously awesome. And the fact they got Pathfinder as well is really cool. They're 120 points though, so they're a bit expensive. If you're going to be playing these, you definitely don't want to be throwing them away. And you don't really want to be charging them into the front of things as well. You want to be putting them on the flanks, or you want to be getting around things, getting the flank charges, getting the rear charges with these. That's how you want to be effective at them, because just 10 attacks hitting on 4s with Thunderous 1. It's not going to do a lot of damage, not at all, and they're just going to get creamed on the counter charge, and you can't really afford to do that for 120 points. So if you are going to field these, you've got to be smart with how you use them, because it's going to be quite difficult to get your points back on them. And that they're super squishy as well. They're defense 3, and they got a pretty low nerve, so they're going to be targeted for shooting, definitely. And they're going to be wavering, let's be honest. So if you do field these, they're a nice unit, and you could definitely get some good damage out of them, but you've got to have to be smart in how you play them. So there we go, guys. That's every single unit choice in the Basilea army reviewed, and the formations as well, and my thoughts on all of them. I hope you enjoyed that and found it quite informative. So all that's left to do is give you a list of a 2,000 points Basilea army. This is how I play mine, and kind of like a template I run all my lists with, really. This is actually a list I have taken to a tournament, so this is a tournament list. I took it to a nice one-day tournament in Bristol a few months ago, and I actually did quite well. Of 4 games, I won 3 and lost 1. So I actually did quite well. I didn't place that high because I'm not a great tournament player. I think you have to be quite ruthless to play in tournaments. You've got to get those 19-1 wins. You've got to literally table your opponents to do well, and I'm not great at doing that. But anyway, here's the list then. So starting off, we have a horde of men-at-arms with spears. And then these guys have the Brew of Strength. It's just a great anchor unit to put down fairly centrally on the board. A lot of nerve. And with our phalanx as well, it's going to be tough for your opponent to get rid of that, because obviously Thunderous is negated, and I give it Brewer Strength just so it hits a little bit harder. Then next, underneath that, sorry, we have 2 regiments of Paladin Foot Guard. Again, like I mentioned, I think these are just really good units. They're defense 5, they got a high nerve, and with that Iron Resolve. The point of these 3 units I'm starting off with is that that's a big wounds pool to sit in the middle, and that is your anvil, really. So if you have your horde, and if you can ideally get those 2 regiments on either side, sometimes deployment doesn't allow for that, but if you get those down, great anvil unit, and then you can get your fast stuff coming around at your opponent. 2 troops of Penitent mobs. I use these as chaff. They're great. They're 70 points. They do have headstrong as well. Like I said, they're defense 3. They're not going to last, but they're good chaff. And then first off, just the 1 horde of Elohi in this list, and only with healing brew as well. So I was a little bit worried when I made this list that I wanted my horde of Elohi to be more effective. And if I could change this list, I probably would try and squeeze in some points to give those guys elite or something like that, just to make them hit a little bit harder. I had an instance where they charged into the front of some goblin flea bags, just not even hindered, and they only wavered flea bag riders, and it was a bit of a bummer. Under those, Paladin Knights with Potion of the Caterpillar, obviously for the Pathfinder, just the 1 regiment of knights here. So they go Potion of the Caterpillar for Pathfinder. Under those, the Sisterhood Panther Lancers, Regiment of, totally naked. These guys did okay, actually. They're speed 10 nimbles. I was putting them down on flanks and stuff, usually leaving them quite late in deployment. And then trying to get like a wrap around with them. If my opponent didn't have much stuff on the board, I was able to outmaneuver him. They were quite good at that, and obviously that 20-inch range has been good. Bearer the Holy Icon, just some cheap inspiring, and then loot. So the Bane Chant was almost always going behind my horde of Spearmen, to make them crushing 2, and then sometimes if I didn't need it, I'd put it on the Paladin Knights as well. Underneath, an Elohi. Yeah, big fan of these. Nothing on him this time, but sometimes I run him with Brutal, sometimes I run him with Haste. I find Haste quite good on Elohi to make them speed 11, because these guys, you can actually give them magic items, don't forget, that's just one thing that makes him even better again. And then to round all that up, 2 Phoenixes. Yeah, so these Phoenixes were super effective in tournament play, just because they could like pick off objectives and go and score here and score there. And just a real thorn in your opponent's side. I found these, I normally run 1, but 2 of them, they were really, really good. Yeah, big fan of these. They proved very well. In fact, the only game I lost was when my Phoenixes died. And in the other 3 games that I won, my Phoenixes didn't die. So that, I guess that says it all, really. They're that good. So there we go. How many drops is that? I think it's 12 drops. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12. Yeah, so 12 drops. So not too elite. I think about 10 or 11 is really elite in tournament play. And sorry, I didn't mention this is a 1995 list, not a 2,000 points. So because it's under the 2,000 points threshold, that means you can't spam 3 drops. So if you want to play a war engine, you can't take 3 of them. You can only take 2 because of the points limit. So I actually quite like that, and I think most tournaments are doing that these days, which I'm a big fan of. So yeah, this list worked out really well for me. So like I said, your play style with this is to get your anvil units down in your paladins and your men at arms, and then you get your fast stuff. In other words, your Elohi, your Sisterhood Panther lancers. You get it around the flanks, you get it wrapping around, you outmaneuver your opponent, and just hope that he can't break your anvil while your hammers are smashing him down. Yeah, the really fast list, multiple flyers. I think there's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 flying units in this, which is brilliant. Lots of projected threat range, just makes it difficult for opponents to like maneuver around you. And 5 sources of inspiring, which is awesome. It's literally brilliant. I honestly don't think I played a game where I had anything out of inspiring range. You've only got 12 drops and 5 of them are inspiring themselves. So it's brilliant to have inspiring absolutely everywhere. That's a definite bonus of playing Basilea. It's really great. And then also lots of headstrong if you get wavered. And relatively high defense across the board in terms of, your Elohi and your paladins and stuff like that. It's a pretty tough army. Yeah, so big fan. That's how I play my Basilea anyway, and that's a pretty good list, and I've had a lot of luck with that. So there we go. I hope you found that informative, and I'll catch you on the next one.